Apologize for last Monday. We had some technical problems with microphones, and they seem to be working now, so we can actually have our webinar today. So Judy and Jody from Webster University in St. Louis are going to present on a new model they have in their library for liaison librarianship. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time for the presentation and discussion, so I will let them take it away whenever they're ready. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Borgerdine, and I'm an Instruction and Liaison Services Librarian at Webster University. We're located in St. Louis, Missouri. Specifically, with my relationship to EBSS, I am the liaison to the School of Communications as well as the Department of English.
I'm Judy Gazy. I'm also an Instruction and Liaison Services Librarian. Jody invited me to join her for this webinar because I'm the liaison to the School of Education as well as the assessment librarian, although I do not yet have that title. But that's one of the things we're going to talk about today.
All right. And again, here's us, and we'll have our contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions or anything, you can always get a hold of us afterwards. So just a little bit about our institution. It is a unique university that we work for. Webster University, even though we are located in St. Louis, technically in Webster Groves, Missouri, which is about 15 minutes from downtown St. Louis, we have about 80 campuses located in metropolitan areas, military bases, and other locations around the world. So you can see from this map that we are pretty spread out everywhere worldwide. In addition to these on-the-ground campuses around the world, we have a very robust online program where students can earn undergraduate and graduate degrees as well as certificates for both at the grad and undergrad level. Specifically, oh, this is Judy, sorry.
That's all right. Okay, so this is a picture of our library here at the home campus. This is where Jody and I both work. A lot of our current efforts are on the faculty, staff, and students right here at the home campus. We service them with face-to-face instruction, research consultations, and a lot of other services. We are trying to get into a little bit more the online students at extended and international campuses. We do that somewhat right now through video tutorials, webinars, chat, which they can access through our website. And then we also, in addition to students, we support research interests of faculty and staff worldwide and online, and also give curriculum support for all of the academic programs.
So this is sort of our current model of our department, the Instruction and Liaison Services Department. We were formed in 2008, actually 2 weeks after I joined Webster University. We were the reference department, and then again about 2 weeks after I started, we were split up. So reference services was their own department, and then the Instruction and Liaison Services Department was formed with the idea to allow us the opportunity to focus on information literacy and instruction, and to try and develop this information literacy model across the university. It was felt that if we were still in reference, that we would be trying to do all these things plus serve hours at the reference desk, and there's just not enough time in the world to do all that. So our department was formed again to allow us time off, not making us required to work the desk unless we really wanted to, and again to focus on our liaison areas. Each of us has the title of Instruction and Liaison Services Librarian, with just a couple of exceptions. We've got our department head, Holly, Kathy is also the university archivist, and then Emily was an Instruction Liaison Services librarian until about a year ago. She became head of reference services, so technically she's not in our department, but since her office is right next door, right in between Judy and I, she still is ex officio in our department.
She still is an Instruction and Liaison librarian, so those duties did not go away for her. She just received additional duties and now head of reference.
Right. So really what changed everything with getting us to get out of this liaison model, and let me step back real quick. I forgot to mention one thing about our current, the model that we have right now is that we do everything for our liaison department. So again, I'm School of Communications and English, Judy's School of Ed. So we do the instruction, library instruction sessions. We do the research support for faculty and students. We do the marketing of those services to our particular units. We develop the assessment tool, so to speak. If I'm doing a webinar for School of Communication students, I'll develop the assessment tool for that. So there's a lot of redundancy in what we are currently doing. So I just wanted to point that out because it'll make sense in just a moment.
So in a sense, we operate as silos. We're all doing our own thing and doing repetitive tasks.
Right. But really, last year is when we started doing a concerted effort with webinars. We used to do webinars periodically when requested by our extended campuses, maybe one per school year, and it really was more of an overview of our services. Then last fall, we started doing these on a regular basis, almost monthly, or in some cases we were doing 2 a month, and focused really on topics such as citation management, presentation skills, APA, demystified, and so on. The response has been overwhelming, with some webinars having more than 100 people registered. There was a question that we did ask, do you want to learn more about our future webinars? And about 70% said yes. So we realized that there is this demand. And in addition, we started getting questions from faculty and students outside of the webinars.
I was giving a webinar on presentation skills, and one of the participants put his name and cell phone number and said, Judy, call me when you get a chance. He was a faculty member at our Kansas City campus, and he said, you know what, our students and faculty here really don't even know that you exist, which was a huge eye-opener for us. And we were servicing a large number of students and faculty through the webinars, so we were essentially using them as a way to reach them. But this was also another reason for our feeling that we needed to restructure our department, because honestly, we all are so overwhelmed. We rarely get out of here in 40 hours a week. So to suddenly say, okay, add on online students, distance learning students, and do everything that you need to get them on board was just not realistic.
So we also realized, too, that some of our other roles, such as collection development, were starting to get neglected. I mean, and I can attest to this, where I would just order, it was just easier to order the choice essential titles for my subject areas because of time, as opposed to really thinking about what my collection, or what my communication students and faculty needed. So we knew we could not sustain our outstanding service with our current liaison model. So we began exploring other options.
So this chart is, this was, as the assessment person, my first thought was, let's see what type of numbers we're talking about with online and extended campuses. I've been at Webster about a year and a half, and my focus has always been on students and faculty on the home campus, and that's really been the way it was with the department. And last fall, when we said, let's just start throwing out some new topics for webinars and kind of just see what happens, and they really were taking off. So I wanted to see, I felt that this needed to be part of the conversation. Let's look at how many people we're talking about. So if you look at that first column, Webster Groves, that's the St. Louis campus, and that is actually the smallest numbers. So we looked at that and thought, wow, we are just, there's great potential for serving a lot more people. So that validated what was happening in the webinars, that they were growing, more and more people wanted to find out what we were offering and wanted to work with us, and there was potential for helping a lot more students and faculty. Okay, so while I created that chart, I got that from the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, those student and faculty numbers. I also wanted to see what literature was out there, and I simply put overworked liaisons in the search box, and this came up. Now, UNCG is my alma mater, so I was immediately very interested in this article and some of those names. I know those folks. So at any rate, they already did what we had gone through, realized that they couldn't possibly do all the areas of their jobs as liaisons, like instruction, collection development, research consultations, embedding in class, weeding, similar to us. That's what we're doing right now. And they said, this is not working. What else can we do? So their article showed a couple of what a couple of different institutions were doing, but one that caught our attention was one that centered around functional roles, and that ended up being what we gravitated toward.
Mm-hmm. So for example, one of our coworkers, just kind of reiterating the silo aspect of the way that we are operating, is one of our colleagues, Mary Ann, organizes our webinar series. So she organizes them, brainstorms the topics, schedules them, markets them, assesses them, does all of that for just the webinar series. So what we were looking at, again, was kind of these functional roles. How can we specialize in certain aspects? So this is the proposed model that we have developed, where we still have a little bit of the same. Holly and Emily are still head of their respective departments. Judy would officially become the assessment librarian. I would become the communication and outreach librarian because I have a background in communication and marketing, and I present on the topics and so on. And I'll let Judy go ahead. And
so some of the roles were pretty easy. I was already unofficially doing the assessment role. In fact, when I was hired a year and a half ago, that was a part of the job description, although that was not the title. So that was something I was already doing. Jody and I kind of teamed up on marketing. She's excellent in marketing. We were marketing the webinars, so that was a natural role for her to do that. And the others, we just kind of brainstormed about what other functions would we want and who felt like they could take the lead on them. And you know, as far as like me with assessment, like Jody said, she presents on her topic. I presented twice on assessment topics, you know, in the past year, and the person that I co-presented with, my friend Carol over at WashU, she's the assessment coordinator. She's got that title, yet if you look at my title, you would have no idea, yet I'm someone who's a little bit more of a leader in the St. Louis area community when it comes to library assessment.
So so basically what we're doing is like what Judy said, we're filling the needs filling the needs of our libraries and of our patrons, and not filling what we want. We would like to have a role for a scholarly communication institutional repository person, but where we are right now, we don't need that. Maybe in 3, 4, 5 years when we develop that further, but as of right now, we don't have a need for somebody in that role. So that's just one example of filling what we need, not what we want.
Right, and this was, we felt with going to these functional roles, it would stop the overlap, the overlap of marketing and assessment that we were each doing individually, and then let us serve all the students. So instead of just the home campus, we would then have the time to serve the online students and faculty, and then student and faculty at extended campuses. So we are hoping, and I think webinars are a good indicator that we just keep growing with the folks that we reach, and by not overlapping our efforts, we feel like we'll have the time to do it and do a good job of servicing all those different areas.
Yeah, I mean, we'll still be doing instruction and research support for our liaison departments. We're even looking at things as collection development. I mean, we're still going to be doing collection development for now, but we might be looking at other models to centralize that within our resources management services department, also known as tech services. So maybe that piece will become less emphasized for us, so that we can focus more on these functional roles. So where are we now? We are in the very, 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 very early stages of this. And
we're basically writing our job descriptions right now.
Yeah, right now. Our department head, Holly, went to our library gate and she's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah. So like Judy said, we're writing our new job descriptions, and hopefully we'll begin working with human resources later this summer to make it official. So there's still a lot to be done, and there is a possibility that HR might say, nah, we don't like that idea. But in the end, right now we feel our department, all of us, we feel really excited and sort of re-energized by our new roles, and it has breathed new life into our positions. And even now, just being able to take a look at things, like for me, looking at things with the marketing, communication, outreach lens, putting that hat on and seeing things where I can definitely improve upon, like our social media and different things, and making a concerted effort to try and do that.
And we can go a lot deeper into these positions now, because now that Jody can just focus on communications and outreach, and I can just focus on assessment, as opposed to focusing on 9 different things at one time and trying to do them all well. Now we still, I guess, have more than one function, but at least we can center our efforts on that one function and really, delve into the literature, speak to folks at other institutions, but really try to get our arms around that one area, and I think it's going to produce a much better product for our services.
I think when I was trying to explain this to my husband, he's just looking at me with glazed eyes like, huh? I told him about an analogy that our coworker Kathy had came up with to kind of describe what we're doing, and she, I think it was a great analogy. She said, think about a surgery room where you have your doctor, your anesthesiologist, your nurse, your surgical technician, your pharmacist. They all have their unique function and their unique role within the surgery room, but they all have to work together to get the job done. And I think this is an example of where we will each have our own functions, but we'll be working together to get the job done, to get those webinars promoted, to get develop more outreach and communication opportunities with our extended campuses and so on. So with this being a discussion session, we have a few discussion topics that we could use to get the ball rolling, or if Jill and Mary have anything any prompts that they have that they'd like to get started with, this is now our discussion time.
Yes, or if you have any questions, it doesn't have to be on the screen. If you'd like to ask us anything, we're happy to answer.
I'm going to jump forward real quick and give you our contact information. That way, if anybody does need to jump off, you can jot our email and phone number down, and feel free to contact us at any time if you have any questions. And I'll leave this up for just a minute and then go back to the discussion questions.
Thank you so much, Jody and Judy. This was a really great presentation, and I think your model looks very interesting. If you do have questions, please type them into the chat box, and Judy and Jody can answer those for you.
All right, I see, Doreen, what are some of the ways you promote the webinar series to all the different campuses? We were just using social media, emailing the extended campus directors and hoping that they would pass it on. But last summer or last fall, I believe, we discovered that we can get a constant contact account through our university. They've got an institutional account. And so we've actually been using constant contact to develop a mailing that goes out to our extended campus directors, faculty, advisors, and push the webinars that way. On the registration form for our webinars, there's a question, would you like to be notified of future webinars? And anyone that said yes, we have added them to constant contact, and then they get a separate mailing specifically about the webinars.
And that, Jody mentioned the statistic earlier that 70% of the people registering for our webinars wanted to hear about future webinars. So that was when we decided we needed to create this list, and it keeps growing, and the response has been great. So some of it, I think, is word of mouth. Once we get 1 or 2 people on a campus, I think that's helpful. But with Webster being all over, initially we were just reaching out to directors of the campuses, and they may or may not have even opened our email. We're not sure really what happens there, although with constant contact we get a little bit more information at times. But
sometimes I think a little bit too much information, but that's one of those where I have to take my librarian hat off and put my marketing hat on, and it's just so that way I don't freak out. Do all of your librarians participate as webinar leaders? All of the librarians in the Instructional Liaison Services Department do. We do have other librarians in other departments that are liaisons to other areas. Like, for example, one of our catalogers is the liaison to music. They don't participate in webinars, but those of us in the Instructional Liaison Services Department do.
So that's the 6 that we were showing on the slide earlier, and we're also starting to collaborate across the university. Like this fall, I'm going to work with the Writing Center coordinator, and we are going to do a webinar on the research cycle. So I'm going to talk about the library's role in the research cycle, and when I normally talk about that to students, I'll then say, oh, and you could go to the Writing Center for A, B, and C. So this way Carolyn can talk and tell them, what her role is. And so we're looking for ways to collaborate across campus.
Does anyone else have any other questions they want to ask?
Does anyone else see them in the same position that we are? Or maybe your job title really doesn't reflect what you do, or there's overlap within your department. Should we talk more about our webinar series?
Would anyone like to hear about our webinar series?
Sure, go ahead. Talk about that.
We basically, when we started it last fall, we were trying to manage how large it got, because we all felt like we didn't have as much time as we would like to commit to it. So we put out a couple of topics and did just 1 or 2 a month. And we were trying to come up with unusual topics in my job previous to this one, I was a librarian at the local community college, and I worked with a class on presentation skills. So I had already developed a presentation on that. So then that became a webinar. We just tried to think of new ideas that the students at the extended campuses, topics that might be useful to them. And honestly, I think pretty much all of our topics from the fall we're going to advance to, or from the fall and spring, we're going to bring them around this year, kind of refresh them and make them new. But we've found different topics to add to it. We honestly, for me personally, I was very surprised how much the webinars took off, and it was, I think, the marketing that did it, and just the fact that the extended campuses and the online students just didn't know about us and weren't getting a lot of information. So even something like simply our overview webinar, we get 130, 150, people that, it's a lot of folks. And when I first came, and that was only a year and a half ago, our numbers were more like 30, and we were like, woohoo, 30, so to get over 100, just with a little bit of marketing, was pretty neat.
Just a couple of questions that had come up. Kristen asked, who's working the reference desk in this model? There's still the Department of Reference Services that Emily is in charge of, and there are 4 part-time reference librarians that work at the desk. I can't remember how many hours they're technically out there for a whole week, but that is who is working the reference desk. We also now have 24/7 chat support through our consortium, so there is that to also help at the reference desk. How have your collection usage statistics changed or remained the same since you've increased your liaison duties? The online product usage stats. Sorry, I forgot to mute my phone. I think it's just varied, and I think this is just kind of a trend where we are, because of the way that our campus is, and again, we are unique. You saw our statistics where the majority of our students are not here in St. Louis. We do have more ebooks, and we are moving more towards ebooks, even though I know that that's not really the trend, where I think Hugh released a report that millennials prefer print, but I don't think, no matter what age you are, if you are studying at one of our campuses in
Lakeland, Florida.
Lakeland, Florida, right, or the Air Force Base that's out in Death Valley, California. Edwards, Andrews, one of the days, I can't remember, where you're literally out in the middle of nowhere, or you're an online student, out in the middle of nowhere, and you need a book for your class. I don't think what age you are or what age group you're in, you're going to want that book, and no matter what format it can come in. So that's why we've been moving more towards ebooks, and the usage of that has increased dramatically over the past few years. And so that's kind of how we've been doing our collection development. And hopefully that answers your questions about that. Did you have anything more to add about collection development?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, other than that, we focus more on getting the ebook so that more students can use it. We actually will send a print book to any campus within the United States, but again, it takes a couple of days, so
right,
the ebooks are the way to go.
Yeah. Can you talk more about your marketing efforts and how you know who you are reaching? We're still developing the marketing efforts. Really, we've been utilizing constant contact as much as we can, because within constant contact, and this is where my librarian gets a little bit feathers get a little bit ruffled with this, is that you can actually see who opened up your mailing and who has not, who clicked on specific links in your mailing and who has not. So yeah, we can find out who has read our mailings, And that's kind of who we are. Yeah, privacy is not existent in constant contact. I know
Good
what
way to put it.
Exactly. I know whenever I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh. But then Judy, who has an MBA, you know, and thinks with that mindset, you know, was like, you know, think about it, you know, from a marketing standpoint, is that, okay, you know, which people are not.
They're not opening it up, so then we look at, well, what did we have in the subject line?
Yeah.
Do we need to have something a little more catchy in there? It's not so much the who, it's as much as, you know, did they open it or did they not? And if not, let's try to figure out why. Or let's look for other folks on that same campus, if it's the director and they're not opening, or an advisor and they're not opening. When we have our webinars, when a person registers for the webinar, we ask them to identify themselves as faculty, student, or whatever their role is. So if I see that there's a couple of faculty members in a specific webinar, then I will say, those of you that are faculty, we can do this webinar for your classroom no matter where you're located. So if you wanted this presentation skills webinar to be given right to your class will have the chat box and can talk with me directly. We're willing to do that. So if we can get a couple of folks on different campuses on board, and then we ask them to tell other instructors, or if it, sometimes we'll occasionally get a director that signs on, and if they're excited about it, then we know the word is going to get out a little bit on that campus. So it's, we see the numbers increasing. They don't increase with leaps and bounds, but they do increase. And then another way that we've marketed our webinars, I just did the library survey, the survey that's done every 3 years. So I put questions on there about library instruction and talking about the different ways that the liaison can maybe help you partner with an assignment, or partner on an assignment, or present within your class, or create a research guide. And then I put in there, like, if they didn't know that they had this option, there was a box for them to check. So that was showing us, is the word not getting out? Or I, in a sense, was using the survey as a marketing tool. And then I had another question about webinars. There was a question, have you attended a library webinar? And then those that said yes got a follow-up question of, would you recommend the webinar to someone else? And like 99% of students and faculty would, or would want to take another webinar. So that was very encouraging, that our webinars, for once we do get someone to participate, they're seeing the value in it. So I think we get a lot of energy and excitement from that, and just know we just have to keep pushing forward. And we're not going to get 1,000 more people signing on to a webinar, but we might get 50, we might get 100, you know. So I think it's going to be a slow building process, and we'll just continue to keep their contact information, inform them through constant contact, and hopefully it just keeps growing.
Just to answer a couple of questions that have come up, so I guess, Dana, your follow-up question is, so when we compare usage of stat apps from one year to the next, when you teach it, for example, are you seeing differences? Honestly, we've never looked at it from that level, that type of comparison, which maybe we should. We do look at databases every 4 years,
Yes.
and you know, there's been obvious marked increase in many core databases or specific subject-specific databases as those programs and students increase. But then there's also been some databases where obviously usage has decreased for various reasons, and then we can get them out, we can cancel those subscriptions. So, but we've never done anything like comparing one, I guess, standard text, so to speak, that's used across the board, and seeing how that's done over the years. Judy's writing down.
I know, I'm writing down notes.
Good idea. Yeah. That assessment librarian is always thinking of ways to assess something. Kristen, I see your question. I will get back to it. I just want to answer Doreen's real quick about constant contact going to students. Right now, they are not, and unless they are the students that said, or when they registered for a webinar that said, yes, we want to know more about webinars. It's kind of a university-wide issue of trying to get email, like student email addresses or something, like to do a mailing for the entire student population. I remember 15 years ago when I was an undergrad at Missouri State, every day the students got like a daily newsletter of happenings going around on campus. We don't have anything like that for our students, and it's kind of an issue around campus, but I think they're working on it, and I think as soon as that's resolved and we can get those email addresses easily, as opposed to going into the CARS, our online student system, and pull every single email address, which might be violating FERPA, I don't know. But, you know, we don't have an easy way of getting that information yet, but hopefully we'll be working on it.
Yes.
And then, Kristen, I see you've got a couple questions. Your first one about getting things done. Do you run a marketing piece by all the liaison librarians early on, for example? You know, a lot of this with the marketing is still evolving because honestly, I haven't had time to really do a whole lot with it. I'm currently president of the Missouri Library Association, so that's taking up all my extra time, but whenever I get done...
She has a gavel.
Yeah, I do have a gavel. It's pretty awesome. But whenever I do get done with that in January, I hope to devote more time to marketing, communication, and outreach. And everybody here is pretty understanding of the situation that I'm in. But for example, we are working on a mailing that will be going out June 8th to extended campuses through Constant Contact. So it's just going to list, we're only going to be doing one webinar this summer, so it's going to be advertising that, our 24/7 chat through the consortium, and I think a couple of other articles. And Judy and I developed a draft and sent that out. Other people within my department are going to be writing those articles, so we kind of work on it together. Even though I'm I would be the marketing person, I'm not writing all of the materials. It's a joint effort that I'm just overseeing.
We do meet weekly as a department,
Yes.
And that meeting lasts anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that's when we bounce ideas off each other, or if we have something that can't wait or something that we want others to think about, we'll just shoot an email to everyone and say, hey, we'll talk about it on Thursday, but I want you guys to start thinking about this. There's, we are, I think, collectively, we're creative and good at bouncing off of ideas and feeding off of each other. I think some of our best ideas come out of that weekly department meeting.
And it's one of those where it is a good meeting. I know sometimes people are like, oh my God, not another meeting. Not our department meetings. They're really good.
There's a lot of laughing. And
yeah. Sometimes we even get shushed by our own students that are trying to study. We previously created static tutorials, and we still have some, and I will post that link in the chat box, our tutorials page, where we have some web-based tutorials as well as some video tutorials that we created eons ago. I think it was
before I came here.
Yeah, I think those were in Adobe Captivator, Camtasia, or whatever the Adobe product is. And they just weren't getting used, and they were hard to update. The software does take a learning curve, and it just seemed like none of us could master the program, and there was always some sort of issue with it. And every year we'd have to update these tutorials. So the webinars, I think, are in a way eventually going to be replacing these tutorials that we have, because they're easier to create. You just log into WebEx, hit the record button, and there you go.
You know what another advantage of them is the student can ask us a question immediately. Like we tell them right up front, don't hesitate to put a question in the chat box, and we will address your question. So it's very timely for them. So I think that's a little bit more exciting than watching a tutorial. So you're watching something, you need clarification, they put their question in, and then we just address it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a big advantage to that.
Yeah, and we do repeat some of these webinars throughout the semester, or a couple times a semester. And so when we record it every time, so earlier in the session, and I will post it again, the link to our webinar page, we've got a tab for recorded webinars, and so you can go back and record and watch any of the recorded webinars. But what I was going to say is, since we do many of these a couple of times throughout the year, and we record them, they're constantly being refreshed.
Yes.
So like, for example, we're in the middle of redesigning our website, which those of you that know me know that this has been going on for about 3 or 4 years, and it's still going on, but eventually we will get there. And so whereas before with the video tutorials, we'd have to go into Camtasia and do new screenshots, and it was just a pain in the butt. Whereas now, when we finally get the new website, we can do a new overview of library services tutorial with the new website, and in an hour, it's done. We haven't really come up with a schedule, I guess, like finding the perfect time to do a webinar.
We vary it.
We vary it. We've kind of experimented, both, most of them are in the evenings, but we've kind of experimented with doing some during the day or during noon, 3 o'clock. It really depends. Because we have to think about it too, is our students are worldwide, so
lots of time zones.
Yeah, lots of time zones. So you may find on your campus that 3 o'clock on a Wednesday works great for doing live webinars for your guys, but for us, it's all over the place. So that's why we we offer these at different times, and that's specifically why we do the recording. So that way, if we do one at 6 o'clock in the evening, when it's 6 o'clock in the evening here in St. Louis, which is 6 o'clock in the morning at our Thailand campus, they can watch the recording later and then email us if they have any questions.
And they do sign on to our webinars. Every webinar, we'll say, oh, look, there's someone from the Vienna campus or from China, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
When we get the international students.
Yeah. Whenever we do the registrations, I know with WebEx, like you've seen with this specific discussion that we're doing right now, you just click on the link and bam, you're in the room. There is an option where you can register, and then you'll be emailed a link to the room. And that's what we've done, is make people register instead of offering the link ahead of time. And usually we get the number of registrants really just depends on the topic. For our overview, we might have over 100 people register, but when it's time for the live webinar, maybe a third of those actually log in, which you might be like, well, that's only 30 people out of 100 watching the live webinar, but
we keep track of how many times the recorded is clicked,
right,
and then there'll be 100 plus that watch the record. So they're watching them at their convenience, which is good too. We encourage that. If the time's not good, please still sign up because you could watch the recording. We say that right on our webinar page.
Judy is also our unofficial accessibility advocate here at the library. So one of the questions is, how does WebEx handle accessibility issues, closed captions, for example?
I don't know. I've never had to work with a student, so either they've been able to figure it out on their own. I've never had anyone say, hey, I couldn't do this, but how WebEx handles it specifically, I am not sure. But I know we haven't had problems at this point.
She's writing that note down too.
Are there any other questions from anyone? Or does anyone want to maybe talk about if they're also going through some changes with their liaison models and maybe what that looks like?
I'm going to go ahead and go back to our last slide with our contact information. And again, if anything does come up that you think of later, don't hesitate to give us a call or shoot us an email. Or if you want to chat with us more about our webinar series, Judy and I were at a social sciences librarian meetup here in St. Louis, and I can't read. They had like roundtable discussions, and I can't even remember what our topic was, but we ended up talking the whole time about our webinars. And I guess I just think, well, everybody should be doing them, and I didn't realize that there's not a lot of people doing webinars. So, so we'd be more than happy to chat about that. Joyce, we have Canvas as our course management system. We had Blackboard, but then a few years ago they switched to Canvas. And there is a library presence within Canvas. I think just a link to our library's homepage. But we also work closely with the Online Learning Center here on campus that is the home, so to speak, for all of our online students. And I'm not really too familiar with it because Emily's the one that usually works closely with that department. But they have within Canvas those communities, I think. So there's like a student or commons area or something.
They do, actually, I'm glad that we're bringing up the Online Learning Center. They actually do a lot of marketing for us.
Yeah.
They will put up on their blog if we're going to have an upcoming webinar. They will, I think they strongly suggest to their new online students to take our overview webinar. But they are very good about getting the word out. But, I mean, again, we're helping. We're a support system for them, too. So yeah. Everybody wins.
But yeah, exactly. What I was saying, I think with this commons area for students within Canvas, there's discussion boards and different things that are monitored by the OLC. And if questions about the library come up, Kate forwards them on to Emily, who will either answer them or pass them on to the appropriate liaison if it's a subject-specific type of question. So. So we haven't really done a whole lot with Canvas exclusively because OLC is doing a pretty good job of it.
And really, all of our recorded webinars, they just sit on a LibGuide. It's that simple.
Yeah, so a professor or somebody could easily link to it if they wanted to.
Is there anything else that anyone wants to share? We have about 9 more minutes left. So I can chime in for a minute and just talk a little bit about liaison librarianships at MSU, kind of answer number 4 of your question. We actually kind of have both of these in a sense. So we do have our subject librarians who are responsible for departments and in those subject areas, but we are starting to hire individuals with certain skill sets who can kind of break down those silos. So for example, we're looking for a data librarian right now, and that person will not be a liaison to any particular department, but will be responsible for assisting librarians and subject librarians with data. And it's kind of confusing, I would say. I think it would be better if we did one or the other. And I don't know how that would look, but particularly at MSU. But I think we are starting to try and do this shift and break down these different silos, because it's very true. I mean, all of our subject librarians have so many responsibilities and yet do them all very differently. So if we could do more of the functional roles aspect of it, I think that would make a lot more sense. So I never really thought of it that way before. So.
Well, like I said, we're still really early in this. It's not official or anything yet. Our business cards still say Instructional Liaison Librarian.
Yep.
But if this does go through with HR and maybe this time next year, if we are, after a year of us doing this, we'd be more than happy to come back and talk about how it's going.
Right.
Good, yeah. That would actually, any sort of update or report that you could even send out to the EBSS listserv, that might be helpful too.
So fingers crossed that this goes through.
Yeah, best of luck to you all. All right, if there's anything else that comes up, feel free to email Judy or Jody directly. This webinar was recorded, and we do have the chat transcript that will be out sometime early next week. So we'll pass that along to the listserv. So let's thank our speakers, Judy and Jody, once again for sharing this information with us and being so open to answering questions of all kinds that have come out from this. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who attended as well. So
you're welcome, Jill and Mary and Alois. Thank you for hosting this for us, and thank you guys for attending, and especially those that tried last weekend.
Right.
Didn't quite make it. Glad that you were able to come back. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.